Welcome into a Building Blocks Thursday. As always, on Building Blocks Thursdays, we have Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. And of course, Building Blocks Thursdays are presented by our friends over at Bubbles and Blocks Child Development Center. With three convenient locations across the capital city, Bubbles and Blocks is well suited to handle your child care needs. As someone who has experienced Bubbles and Blocks firsthand, one of the best parts is how the hands-on the staff are with guiding your young child through sensory exploration and art. I know it's pretty hard to believe this, Tim, but Hudson's first finger painting experience didn't come with me. It didn't happen at my house. I didn't have to get all upset as there was just paint splattered everywhere. Instead, they do that kind of stuff at Bubbles and Blocks. They help your child explore the world around them at a very early age. They help them explore and learn how to use their hands, learn how to use their fingers. Obviously, when you're feeding a child, you help them get used to a fork or a spoon. They reinforce that over there at Bubbles and Blocks as well. And of course, as we've mentioned several times, much like recruits value stability, so do parents, and so does Bubbles and Blocks, where its management team has been in place since 2019, with some of them having even started when the daycare opened in 2013. Spots are available at all three centers. Get your child enrolled today. Give them a call at 402-328-0404. Once again, 402-328-0404, or shoot an email to info@bubblesandblocks.com. All right, it is Thursday here, which means Tim has joined us, and we, as usual, have no shortage of things to talk about, as Nebraska is always busy, which means Tim is always busy. And you might have thought, well, gee, the portal is done. Yeah, maybe there's some coaches on the road, but how busy could Tim be? Turns out there's a junior day coming up this weekend, and Nebraska will have some interesting players in town. Let's start with this, though, before we kind of run through who some of these key guys are, Tim. Junior days have been kind of a fascinating thing for me when this was a kind of my experience with covering all of this stuff. They seemed like they were really important, and then they seemed like they were not necessarily being phased out, but not nearly as valuable. And now with how the recruiting calendar has changed, head coaches being on the road in January, in-home visits, sped up commitment timelines, feels like the junior day is a pretty big precursor for some guys like, hey, if I really enjoy this, I think I'm coming back here for an official visit. Had
Yeah.
junior kind of changed in even just a short time that you've been doing this?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, especially I think right now where we're at, I think it's like, you've seen Nebraska deliver a ton of new 26 or 27 offers. You've seen them kind of jump in the mix for some guys, new coaches settling down. I think even this list is still coming together, but there's going to be some names that pop up that are going to be on campus for the very first time. That might end up being in Nebraska's class. If you think back to junior day last year, it was Danny Odom's first time visiting Nebraska. And then from there, he was like, I like this so much, I'm coming back to see practice in 2 months. And he was like, oh, I like that so much, I'm scheduling an official visit. And I like that so much, I'm committing. And I'm going to come back for a game. Like it can quickly take off. Um, Now that said, I think this year is going to look a little different than last year, and honestly, previous years of what junior days have been under rule, in my opinion. Just with where we're at in terms of what the list could look like. I mean, it's going to be in terms of the true top end stars. There might be more basketball stars on campus than football stars. Just with, I mean, between the weather, at least uncommitted, between the weather and the way this is kind of working out. You're about to hit a month long dead period. I mean, we already saw Duve Williams, one of the top corners in the country, was on USC's visitor list. Told me he was going to be at Nebraska this weekend a couple of weeks ago, and is instead going to be at Cal instead. Cal, a new program with Tosh Lapoy in the mix, and they're going to get their first shot. So there's just a lot of moving pieces right now, and so this list might end up being smaller than Nebraska initially anticipated. But a lot of the attention, I mean, just in a lot of the new offers they've made and a lot of targets I've talked to, at least the staff seems to be prioritizing, and we can discuss this in depth as to why. the staff seems to be prioritizing, at least this offseason, spring practices more than getting in for like a junior day or getting in to see like a basketball game or what this weekend, could have been. My theory on it, just, piecing between what I've heard and talking to players and stuff, I don't think Nebraska proved themselves enough on the field in the fall to just have the results speak for themselves. And I think they want guys to see this team in action, to see some of these coaches in action and see what this is like in real time, because they think that'll do them better in terms of getting a shot at these guys than just what would be a weekend visit without really getting to see the coaching staff in action, without really getting this. Like, you get to build relationships, but Nebraska does that at a high level. That's not what they need anymore. They need proof in the pudding. They need to show they can develop. Um, and so that's why I think this off season, or the spring at least, I think spring practices are going to be the focus.
And that it seems like that's kind of been something that Matt Rule has really pushed since he returned from Carolina at Nebraska. I mean, he really he kind of said this up at the podium multiple times. He thinks there's a lot of value in guys coming in and seeing a practice and seeing what your position coach is actually like when he's talking to the players versus what he's like when he's in your living room or when he's, DMing you or when you're on campus for any other sort of visit. And so I've kind of always felt like this staff, certainly more than past ones, and a lot of times you take a kid for a visit when you can get them on campus, right? Like you're not going to be overly picky about it. But it seemed to me in recent years they almost prioritize just getting them on campus more for the spring practice than they really ever did for the spring game itself. I mean, the
Oh
game
yeah,
lends itself to getting players because it's on a Saturday and everything else. But last year, especially, felt like a concerted effort to make sure some of their top guys were coming in for these practices and not so much for the Husker games, which I think, having watched the Husker games myself was probably a good decision.
yeah, yeah, very fair. I do. Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I also think like you look at what the staff. We both have talked to these guys after spring practices. I feel like the most honest quotes I get, or the most like, oh, like I picked this up, I picked this up. Like, guys really come out of those spring practices like excited, I think. And again, because at the end of the day, I mean, it's a practice. It's not like there's a spin there where it's like, oh well, Nebraska lost, but what did you think of the game? Or like, there's nothing. It's more so just they get to see these coaches in action. They get to kind of apply some things, and I think the big thing for, I think I'm sure you picked this up too. Nebraska's really, they're not like, there's some coaching staffs out there that are really shy about their playbook, or really shy about, hey, we'll develop you once you get here, but like until you get here, yeah, we'll give you some pointers. But like Nebraska doesn't do any, like Nebraska's super on it with like, hey, we'll sit down in the film room with you, we'll break down your game, and we'll give you a bunch of pointers. Like, we'll have you watch these drills and be like, hey, apply this to your game. Like, and so there's a lot of that I think guys really connect to, and there's just an openness that comes from practices and camps that you don't really get on these, like, again, weekend visits where nothing's really happening. Um, with the team, or even the game day visits where there's so much other things going on, where the coaching staff doesn't really have time to sit down and connect with you, or sit down and break down your film like that. If they do, you're really, really special.
Yeah, and it's interesting you pointed out like that because sometimes it goes so far as once that relationship has sort of been established and you've had that conversation about watching your film together and they have a better feel for your game. I mean, I've had guys tell me in the past that they've had different people, whether it was Keith Williams. I think it hasn't necessarily been the primary position coaches, but those other guys involved in the personnel department will send over cutout clips from their high school stuff and be like, hey, I saw you working on this here. Or, hey, I saw you doing this here. And so they've done a really nice job making themselves as an available resource, even if the recruit ultimately isn't going to end up in Lincoln. I think in a way to sort of show like, hey, we're football people. That's a big part of to me the Matt Rule DNA and the Matt Rule recruitment is like this thing is about football. Like we want you to be super comfortable with us, and in order to do that, if you want to talk about what it is that you need to get better, we don't have a problem telling you because we want you to be the best version of yourself you could be, and that includes being on the football field. So yeah, that certainly tracks. So you mentioned not as star-studded of a list. They had a pretty strong list last year, and It is always a bit of a gamble when you're talking about a junior day in January. You never know what the weather is going to be at Nebraska. It looks like it's going to be cold, maybe some precipitation in the forecast. But who sort of stands out that you know of? You don't have to run through everybody, but who's like someone that people need to know is going to be in town this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one that as we're getting closer this weekend is going to be Keyshawn Bowman. It was one where this is proof in the pudding of stuff we've talked about for the last few weeks, in terms of what Trey is now. When we talked about the move, to Millard South and all of that, of like, hey, look, Nebraska hasn't necessarily had the results they hoped for in 26, but Trey is kind of becoming this type of talent that draws talent with him, and I mentioned that in a couple of places, and this is proof now. Like Keyshawn Bowman, those two guys just started playing together on the 7-on-7 circuit. They've practiced for a couple of weeks. They played together at Battle Miami. And now the number 6 receiver in the country, who was a former Oregon commit, who's got every offer he wants, is delaying his recruitment. It was planning on announcing his decision here on Feb 12th. Is delaying that decision, making his first trip to Nebraska. Nebraska's surging here. Nebraska's going to make a push over the weekend, and I fully expect them with a positive visit to come out of this thing as one of the front runners, as one of the programs, in the mix to earn an official visit from him. And they've really been trying in Tennessee and Kentucky to, make some splashes to really build, a pipeline of sorts, and work those connections there. This is a step towards that at a powerhouse program in Brentwood Academy. And you watch Keyshawn Bowman. I mean, the tape, the player, like all like yeah, this is one of those guys in this class. Like this is one of those receivers. This is a good receiver class in 27. This is one of those guys that can work inside, can work outside, can take the top off of defenses. Is super versatile, in his skill set and in how he can attack. And I think again less so than, I mean, the talent's obvious. And again, this is going to be one Nebraska's now going to have to work in, and get over the top now. But I think this is a testament, and again, as we find out more names, just there's a draw now. There's a true draw in wanting to play with Trey Taylor. Like, and I think just seeing him on the 7-on-7 circuit, seeing the junior year he had, all of that together, it's got guys really interested in playing with that type of talent.
Did they now? Correct me if I'm wrong here, but they've teamed up together at events before, right? Like this.
Yes.
So, with that being said, how much value when you talk to these receiver recruits and they're thinking about like the quarterback that would be in the class that they're going to go to, how much value do you think there is that a guy like Keyshawn Bowman already knows? One, he knows Trey Taylor personally, but he also knows what he's like on a football field or in a football context. He knows what his football passing skills are like or what it's like to catch a pass from him. I mean, do those things matter when these guys
Yeah.
are kind of considering stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I think, when you're a player like Keyshawn, and I mean, I think this also applies to because the Ahmad Hudson and Nebraska thing, and the Ahmad Hudson and Trey Taylor thing dates back to either right before or right after their freshman year. They just both happened to be at an LSU camp, and they didn't know each other, but Trey threw to Ahmad a few times. Just you know how these drills, like these camps
Mhm.
work. They got quarterbacks rotate with receivers. They just happened to connect a few times, and they've stayed in touch ever since because Ahmad liked catching passes from Trey so much. Trey liked throwing to Ahmad so much. And they've developed that chemistry, and you saw that chemistry on display last year at the Battle at the Boneyard. And I mean, Ahmad told me he wants to come back and do it again this year. Like, and they want to keep building that chemistry. It- At the end of the day, though, with both Ahmad and Keyshawn Bowman, wherever those guys end up, they're going to have an elite quarterback throwing to. Keyshawn Bowman's other options are Tennessee, where the number one quarterback in the country just outphased on Brandon, former 5-star quarterback just signed, and Jerry Curtis, the true number one quarterback in the country here in the 26th cycle, just signed, is another top contender for him. Oregon, of course, still in the mix, and we know what they have at quarterback. LSU for Ahmad, it's LSU really battling in there. They're always going to have talent. They're always going to get so that stuff matters. But at the same time, I think the difference is, and why it matters here with Trey is Trey's does a really good job of, um, getting to know what his receivers want. and he does it really fast. He did that at Carmel Catholic with the new receivers he picked up before his senior year. And part of it is the skills that you pick up on the 7-on-7 circuit when you have to play with new guys. We kind of saw that in real time last year at the Battle at the Boneyard before the tournament really even started, and it was kind of like that morning Trey decided, okay, I'm going to play. Me and Ahmad are going to play. He's going through warmups, and it's kind of just working with like Nick Lanier, who's now one of the fast, a 5-star out of Miami, like working with Nick to figure out, okay, where do I need to throw the ball that is best for you, and like getting that stuff figured out really quick before the tournament started. And obviously, the chemistry developed with his entire team as the tournament played out. But I think the thing with Trey is I think receivers recognize how cerebral he is. And for him, that he throws a very catchable ball. Like we say that phrase, what that means is he's able to dial it up or dial it down and throw how that receiver wants it. Like he knows exactly how to get the ball to his favorite receivers, how to position it. You see it on his high school tape. Like when he takes shots downfield, they're aimed at specific points on that receiver's bar. Like he knows where he needs to hit that receiver for that guy to bring it in more often than not because they've worked that consistently. I think that's part of it. You see, there's quarterbacks that are like that. There are quarterbacks that are just talented quarterbacks but don't connect on that same level on the 7-on-7 circuit. Trey, I think, is just from a personality standpoint and from a play style standpoint, just has a natural draw to him, I think.
Yeah, and Nebraska will certainly be looking to cash in on as much of that natural draw as they possibly can. We talked about him last week. We're going to probably talk about him next week, regardless of what happens. But what is the latest with Dylan Berryman, who is sort of the last target, I guess, in 2026 here for Nebraska, the one of the highest unsigned players in the country, a 4-star defensive lineman. It was Nebraska and Kentucky, I believe, for a while. Now a new team has entered the mix. And should Nebraska fans be concerned that once again they could end up a bridesmaid when it comes to a defensive lineman?
Yeah, some late drama here, and yeah, I mean, I think there's some reason to be concerned here, just because it's a Florida staff that's new, that has some new energy, and again, a lot of early returns coming out of there from their early visits from the portal, and now through high school recruiting, and them hitting the recruiting trail. Guys are really excited about what Summerall's doing, and there's some relationships, of course, coming from Tulane, and some of the relationships that staff had built within the state. So this isn't like a recruitment where they're just picking up from scratch at the last minute. There's at least some familiarity there. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to see how this weekend goes. Nebraska's gonna be bracing to see how this weekend goes. At the end of the day, Nebraska's got of the programs left in the mix. Nebraska's got the strongest relationships built, and Nebraska's also in a position where this is it for them. They also know this is the final like defensive line piece for them, but they also have, from a resource standpoint, they're willing to at least the like for the most part kind of match whatever's put out there for him. So they're in financial position to compete here. They have the strongest relationship. They've done a lot of things right here. If they lose this, I mean, it's going to be unfortunate that it is just recruiting in this day and age. Unfortunately, where like I mean, I saw people, I mean, in the comments after. I mean, naturally, you're going to be upset about this visit getting scheduled and all of that. Of like, well, the staff needs deserve something if this happens. What more do you want them to do? Like that's where I'm at. Of like they've been very competitive from an NIL standpoint. They've built very strong relationships. They've attacked one of the top uncommitted defensive line targets who Dressick need as relentlessly as possible. I mean, the effort they put in last week to go twice. I mean, Matt Rule, Keith Williams stopped by, Corey Brown, and Corey Brown went back again the next day. They've gone in home with him. They've made him a priority. They're in like daily communication at this point, multiple members of the staff. They've done a lot right here. And so if they lose, that is, again, it's the unfortunate, it's how recruiting goes. It would sting a lot more too, considering you lost Burberry earlier this month, considering how defensive line recruiting has gone, and to get to fall short again would really sting. But this is one of those situations where I don't really know what else Nebraska can do between now and Feb 3rd to be this. Like they are the favorite going into the weekend. They could still be the favorite coming out of the weekend. They certainly were coming out. Like he went to Kentucky, came out. Nebraska was still in the lead. Nebraska only kind of widened the gap last week. And so now you're back in a spot where, okay, Nebraska leads heading into the weekend. Is Florida going to supplant them all the way, or can Nebraska hold on? If Nebraska holds on, great. I mean, they deserve full credit for this win. But it can't the other way. I mean, if they lose this thing, I like it's just I'm just at the point where I'm like, I don't know what more
They
people
could have
want
done, yeah.
Nebraska to do here. Like, I don't know what more people want here. Like, yeah.
Yeah. It would I mean, it's just tough. It's part of it is don't leave yourself in a situation where you have to get this guy
Yeah, for
or your
sure.
defensive line recruiting completely falls apart. So we will certainly keep an eye on that one. Tim, as you were talking, I realized one, I wasn't planning on doing a blind rankings, but then I thought of one that I thought would be particularly interesting with signing day coming up here, fake signing day or signing day part two, whatever we really want to call it. I don't know, but we're gonna do an impromptu blind rankings, and it is going to be a blind rankings of how you announce your commitment. So we are going to start with the tried and true 1 through 5. You know how this works. The tried and true. You have a tweet or an edit, I guess, if you would, a graphic, a Hayes Fawcett original for I'd say 65% of the class. Where are you putting that? 1 through 5.
Ooh. I think 4. I like Hayes, and we've built a nice relationship since I've been over here at On 3. But I don't know, I'm about the drama a little bit. I'm about just a little more than that. Like,
Oh, you love the
especially now,
drama.
like, Hayes has become kind of the guy where it's like, you wanna stand out, you wanna do something different. I put that 4 for now.
Okay. What if, and these aren't as popular as they used to be, but what if you have a really well produced, snazzy video announcing your commitment to
Oh,
another team?
video is 1 for me. I love a
Video's
video. I
one. Okay.
in my yeah, like,
And I'm not talking about a stream like,
No, no,
any of
no.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I talk about it all the time with like some of my just like friends on the creative side of things of just like, man, do you remember the Bleacher Report era where Bleacher Report was like funding these videos essentially for these guys? Like and that was just the best. And I wish there was more. Like, we see it every now and then, every year. Someone has a good one, and you have like Quasi Gilmer's one to UCLA, kind of parodying the old LeBron commercial, was good. You see a creative one here and there, but no, I love when guys are creative with it, and especially I love when every now and then you run into recruits too that like love the film side of it or like the creative side of it. Like, there was a Micah Hudson. He was a 5-star receiver. He ended up at Texas Tech, and but he was a kid who brought his own camera to his official visits and like shot it. Basically, was like, "Hey, shoot it on this camera. Like, I want to edit my own pictures." And would just edit his own like OV pictures and stuff. Like, I love when recruits like show that creativity.
All right. So we got that at 1. We have the edits, the Hayes Fawcett originals at 4. All right. Here at number 3, or excuse me, not at number 3. The third topic, the hat ceremony.
I think 3. I think it's a classic. I think it's tried and true. There's some drama there, but like, I think at this point too, it's kind of all been done. Like, I don't know what's new there.
Mhm. All right. The next one. You have a signing day ceremony. You have hats on the table, but you announce by unzipping your jacket, revealing the shirt underneath that is not one of the hats on the table.
Okay, if it's not one of the hats, because people have you've seen the guys that do it with the hat on the table, like, it just
Yeah.
kills the surprise completely. I think this gets the nod over just the traditional hat ceremony for the like, okay, well, because I mean, I've been there. I've also been on the other end of it where a guy walks into a commitment. You have an idea where he's going. I mean, typically we do at this point. You have an idea, you have the story for the most part ready. But the hat isn't at the table. And I think just for that quick second of panic, I think it's worth it. Like, I think that quick second of just like, oh no, like, it's worth it. I forget which recruit it was a Nebraska one recently, who It wasn't even supposed to be dramatic. I think it wasn't this signing day, it was last signing
Wasn't it
day.
Cortez Mills? Like
It
he
was
did the
Cortez.
Oklahoma stuff, and then he ended up with
Yes,
with yeah.
yeah, that was one where like, oh yeah, that's what it was because he was fully expected to flip to Nebraska on signing day, but then initially put on the OU hat, and I was like, wait a
Mhm.
minute, and then he like, but yeah, like I like when guys like there's just a little bit of panic. I like when people strike the fear, and because I know it goes all the way up, like you know what I mean. Like I know it's not just me. Like I know like Steve Wilfon's watching that, like oh no, like the pick's wrong, like you know, but it's not.
All right, so you got your 1 through 4 already, so that leaves just 5 open. To recap, video at 1, you have the fake with the hat, but you actually have the shirt underneath at 2, the hat ceremony at 3, the edit at 4, and at number 5, still at a signing ceremony, they have the hats. This time there's no shirt. They reach under the table and pull out a live puppy.
See, well, like if I know that wouldn't be last, but like
No,
again, I
I
would like
know
someone
that's
to, but I would like to see someone do
uh
that.
Georgia had a running back that did that. He
Did
pulled
that?
out a bulldog puppy. It was Isaiah Crowell, if you remember that name at all.
Yes, yes.
He had a puppy at his signing day ceremony, and everybody just loved it because who wouldn't love a puppy at a signing day ceremony? All right, like I said, that was not planned. I was just thinking, wonder how Tim views these things.
Yeah.
And there's usually more than enough drama for signing days, whether it's the weather causes
Mm.
issues or the last second phone calls. We watched Jaden Francois, deliberate, even though he had already sent everything before any of that deliberation happening on camera even took place. Then he ended up having a wild career where he bounced around several different schools. I think he finished at North Carolina or UCF. UCF.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
UCF.
He actually had a pretty good end to his career. So shout out to Jaden Francois for doing that. All right, let's
I was
jump
going
back
like
into
the
this. Oh,
I
go
was just
ahead.
going to say real quick with the video, the other part of it too is I've just had randomly success with it too, where like I've just happened to know the video editor working on it. So like,
Mm,
and you also because it's a whole production, like you get a heads up a couple of days ahead of time. I'm just like, hey, this is where like we filmed the video. This is likely what it's going to be. We filmed a couple endings, but it's likely going to be, and so that also helps a little bit.
yeah, the video, the problem with the video to me is like when it gets released, you build everything up to that. And then I feel like there's actually a high percentage chance that those guys end up flipping and then they just have to do the edit in the end anyways.
Yeah, that's.
You
I
can
mean,
only
that's
do the video once.
yeah, exactly. And that's I've always thought about that with guys that do like anything that is super over the top or like I mean you see the guys that get they commit and they get the tattoo and then they end up somewhere else. You see all of that all the time, but like
You do
and that's
not
always
get
tough.
tattoos in the transfer portal
Yeah,
era.
that's always tough. You don't get you don't get
You do not do
but
them. You
that,
do not do them.
but it's
Oh
always
man, I
tough. And
forgot about that.
I've also noticed, and it's not often. Maybe it's just a kind of just you notice the quote, and then a couple years it comes back to bite them in the ass. But like guys that do well, I don't want to be the guy that's flipping or doing the portal stuff. Like they say that early in their recruitment,
Mm.
and they're always the one that have the like 3 flips, transfer to 2 schools. Like they always. I don't know if it's just always like that, but like I've just kind of noticed the guy. Every time I hear that now from like a younger guy, I'm like I don't it's a good thought, but like just to keep your options open because this thing
Yeah.
goes in so many different directions.
If there's nothing else to be learned, it's that being absolute about anything this early in life is never a good thing. It's
Yeah,
true later in life too. The amount of times you're like, oh, I'll never do that. And then eventually, you do. So it goes. All right, let's dive back into some recruiting here with what Nebraska's got going on for 2027. And they've been really busy on the road. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about Jeep Wade. I wanted to ask you because we didn't get into it as much last week. I want to ask you about Roy Manning because I know he's
Mhm.
been out and about. Isaiah Miller, one of the guys that I know that he stopped by to see 2027 out of Wisconsin, defensive end or edge, whatever we call him these days. But Roy Manning is a guy who has a prolific recruiting background. Like this is someone who was involved in Jabril Peppers and a number of other things when he was at Michigan. He's a guy that is really, really, I think, well respected in terms of being able to do some damage when in the living room or in the coach's office. What have you kind of noticed from where he's been at, and what's the response been to Nebraska having him now as one of the coaches out on the road for him?
Yeah, I mean, the early returns have been positive just in terms of just getting out there and seeing guys in person, building that relationship and doing what he can to kind of make up ground. Because as you know, when you for all of these 27 guys, when you enter like the January of their going, the January of their junior year, essentially, you're somewhat late for the most part. You're not typically early to the party. Sometimes you are, but for the most part, you're joining the mix late. And so for some of these guys, it's Nebraska's either offered and haven't been able to gain much traction, or Nebraska's not offered yet and trying to gain some traction. And by showing face, by being there in person, you get an opportunity to kind of build an edge a little bit, especially when you're the position coach. Like I think Manning in particular, going down to Houston, and making the rounds down there has made a big impact. To yesterday, he was in Kentucky, I believe, making the rounds, and so you've seen like that like what the impact of that, and so I'm really curious. What I will say is he doesn't have a type yet. I'm trying to figure out if he's got like a type he's looking for an edge rusher. They're kind of all over. You've got your sawed off edge rushers. You've got your like squattier guys that are more strong side D ends. You have your lengthier weak side types. Like you're definitely finding your buckets now. You're definitely like, okay, this guy goes into this bucket. This guy goes into this bucket in terms of where he fits in. But yeah, there isn't really like I don't think there's one consistent. I see. Like I mean, even like it's not like all of these guys are super bendy. You know what I mean? Like there's some guys that are more stiff hipped and are just kind of straight pass rush. Like, and there are guys that are more versatile and there are guys that can bend, that can do a different. So that's been interesting. I think on both sides of the ball, Jeep Wade and Roy Manning, like compared to what the staff previously had been doing, there's not really a type anymore. Even the offensive line, like Donovan Royal really had a type. They don't really have that anymore. You look at the type of bodies they've offered and the guys they've offered along the offensive line, it's all over. Like it's different. It looks very different
Why do
than
you think that
um,
is?
I think it's coach. I mean, Donovan, of course, had that very unique coaching style,
Mhm.
and I think was very strict about recruiting guys that looked like him, or not looked like him, but like fit personality wise. Um, and now there's no longer that looking for the personality fit necessarily. There's also no longer like we're looking for someone that can do the knuckles up blocking. We're looking for someone that like it. I think a lot of targets that like Gus Corsair, for example, down in Kansas, like that's been a guy that's one of the top regional linemen, has been for some time. Has camped in Nebraska, has expressed interest, was only recently offered by Nebraska because he didn't fit with the previous offensive line coach, but he fits, at least Wade, looks at the talents like, okay, well, we can work with that. I think it's more so just having the faith in your coaching ability. I think this goes for both sides of the ball. Manning, Orich, and then on the offensive side, Teasley and Wade, having the trust in the coaching ability to say, okay, we can put this guy and make this guy a capable player in our defense. I mean, you look at what on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, offensive line, of course, there still has to be like guys have to look be built a certain way. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in the Big Ten, you still have to have your whatever. It's not really like that on the defensive side of the ball, and you've already seen that in how they attack the portal. You're already kind of seeing that in how they're building out this 27 board. I mean, across his career, Orich has had success putting guys in position to be successful, but not necessarily running a consistent system that is successful. So I think the reason on the defensive side of the ball, you're seeing all these different offers to guys that look all different types, and there's not really a consistent. Like I mean, like you mean look at the new linebackers they've offered. Some of those guys can play edge. Some of those guys can really just truly play just like middle linebacker, or they can do like they all do different things. They don't really have a type, because I think they want to bring in talent and then figure out how to work that talent in with the other 10 pieces on the field, or figure out how to work with that. But they trust their system and they trust their development, to figure out how to use talented players. I think now they're just looking for talent, and there's not, in addition to talent, it's not, we're looking for talented edge rusher, but he has to be at least 6'4". He has to have this type of bend, and he has to have like these metrics in the weight room or in the strength. Like it's just we're looking for talented football players. We'll figure out what to do with them.
Yeah, that's such a massive departure because if you think back to especially when Matt Rule first got here, they really did not care about high school like production at all. They didn't, it wasn't, it's not that they didn't try to find talent, but it was, well, if he's not at least this tall or doesn't run this track time or doesn't do this thing, he's already off the board. Like that's a pretty big switch for Matt Rule. Like where where do you think that comes from his perspective? Like just trusting your guys to be better with flexible player to procurement. It's sort of a huge swing for him to move off of this, I think. And it's not like they're just, as you said, they're not recruiting anybody. They're not taking a 5'6" offensive tackle just because he's really good at staying low. They're they're gonna have standards to a degree, but it doesn't sound like what it used to.
I kind of think more than just the shift from the staff, because I still think it's just more so just a shift in how you recruit. Like I think a lot of these, you're making a lot of offers to enter the mix, but even these some of these 27 offers aren't necessarily committable. Not until the guy makes it to campus and they
Mhm.
evaluate, and I think they get further into it. Like they've made so many new DB offers, where it's like, well, they don't have the room obviously for all these new DBs. It's just
I don't know. They tend to take about 47 defensive backs every year.
but yeah, like it's just I think it what it is um as a staff and as a program, it's just kind of looking at what the rest of the country is doing and where like what offers mean now and being like, okay, well, we just want to be in the mix and we want to like have a seat at the table. We'll figure this out down the line. Like we'll have this conversation moving forward if you're like a take or not, and if you can get to campus. But like it's more so just we offer you, you get an opportunity to get to campus. We'll continue to evaluate from there. And I will say, like to the point of just like the it very much feels like what we talked about in terms of this departure from what they used to do. Where they're doing that, it's where they trust the coaches to develop, like offensive line. I think they really trust Jeep Wade and the results he's gotten. A wide receiver, I think they really trust Nikhil Shorts now. I think he's earned some trust to land the guys he wants and develop those guys. That said, I don't think receiver is one of those positions where they're really going way off the beaten path or anything. For the most part, they are kind of in the mix for 4 or 5 star
Mhm.
type receivers. And if they are in the mix for anyone else, like outside of that, it's regional guys that do still fit and have, like are talented. Uh, but like defensive side of the ball, like I think they really trust Addison Williams to kind of do his own thing with defensive backs. Up front, I think they trust Orich now. They trust at edge rusher. I think they trust Manning, and so for that reason, I think you're going to see it. And Corbin Brown, I think that's going to be an evolving process. I think we're still trying to figure out what he's looking for on the trail, and what kind of body types and what he's what he's trying to mold, what he's looking for. So I think that's a bit of a work in progress. But I think really it's Wade, it's Orich, Manning, and Williams, and I throw shorts in there too. Running back, it's always been running back's always been one of those positions where they've trusted EJ Bartel. Like they've
Yeah.
always gone. I mean, you look at the way like last cycle they had the what they had on the board versus how Nebraska actually had them ranked. Jamal Rule was up there with Dzephen Walker and with
Brian Bonner.
Brian Bonner. Yeah, those guys that had the 4 stars by their name and were nationally recognized names. Nebraska felt confident in Jamal Rule being the guy and kind of prioritized him, landed him, and once they were done, and once they got him, they didn't really try at any other backs.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That is definitely a good point. We're gonna go with this. So coaches are on the road now. We're now in just it's the second year head coach has been able to go out in January now since
I
they've
think
shifted
so.
things. What
I believe
like
so.
how much does that matter? Like, do you think it's a big deal for these recruits? And you talk to them, and I mean, I talked to them last year, but it's such a departure from what it used to be. But how much does it matter to have Matt Rule coming by in January if you're a 2027 right now? If you're, maybe you're not getting to Nebraska for a junior day, but you're considering Nebraska, and then he's there at your wrestling meet, or he's there at your basketball game, or he's sitting in the coach's office when you come down during fifth period because you got the note to leave your class.
Mhm.
Like, did you think the head coach on the road is a factor as much as it used to be?
I think so, absolutely. Like, I think especially now with where Nebraska is, and I mean, you're coming off of this year. It actually works out a little better than last year, where you're coming off this busy portal cycle, where for communication may have dropped off with some 27s. It just happens because you're just busy with so many different things. But just in general, I think there's a lot of 27s that and I mean, this happened last year too, where they don't really know where they stand. Like I said, Nebraska's made a ton of new offers recently, and they've made some big offers, and they've re-entered the mix for certain guys. They've picked up picked up communication with guys. Like, so there's a lot happening. And it really means a lot when it's like, okay, I walk in and I'm like, oh, well, where do I stand on Nebraska's board? Oh, Matt Rule's here. Like, okay, well, now I will make it a priority to sit down with my family and make sure we get that spring date set, and that's like a big tone shift from like guys I texted, a couple of weeks ago, like, hey, are you planning to visit Nebraska at all this offseason? They're like, yeah, we're working on it. And then after Nebraska stops by their school, I'm like, hey, just checking in. Have you had a chance to like line up that visit or get anything said? He's like, we're working on it now. Like after the coaching staff sat down with me, we really want to get that done. Once they get their spring schedule sent to me, we'll have a date set. Like as soon as that's done. Like we talked about Danny Odom at the start of this, how last year's junior day was so big. When I talked to Danny at the All American Bowl, I was like, when did this really start for you? Like with Nebraska, because him and Addison Williams were close dating back. Like Addison
Yep.
was early to offer him at UCF. They've
Yep.
been close. He just didn't have the opportunity. And Danny was like, I went down there, and this was he was like, it's not that I went down there. He was like, they came down first. Like they came down multiple times to see me. Like Addison was down to see me, and then Coach Rule and Coach Butler were down to see. Like
Yep.
I learned very early on that they really wanted me, and I got to campus. I really liked it, and from there, I was like, well, I kind of want to be here, and just kind of built from there. So it does matter a lot. Like I mean, they were at like they are trying, fighting tooth and nail to stick in the mix for Marcus Fakatu. It, it,
Hmm.
it meant a lot that they stopped by. Like it really meant a lot that they stopped by to see him kind of in full force. And now he's going to start working, build that relationship with Corey Brown, and the rest are going to keep chipping away there. Hope to get him on campus in the spring. They
Orange Lutheran,
really
right? Same program
Orange,
as TJ
yeah,
Latif.
same as TJ
Yeah.
Latif. Like they were in kind of position there where if that visit didn't happen, they maybe just fall out of the mix altogether. Here in the next couple of weeks. And now they're at least okay. Hey, we have a chance now to spring visit. Well, I mean, they still have a long way to go to potentially land him. You
Sure.
know what I mean? And there's a lot of ground to make up, and that's obviously like kind of like a lofty example. It's a number 2 defensive lineman in the country, but you're seeing that where it does effectively move the needle, like seeing Matt Rule there. Like I mean, a more realistic, and again, it's a 5-star, so realistic, but whatever. Kennedy Brown, Nebraska's in the mix and has been a very like every time Kennedy's come to Nebraska or talked about Nebraska, it's been positive. But he's got options coast to coast. Every time
Yep.
he talks, there's always a program or two that gets missed when he's talking about them. And Nebraska's found themselves at that program that when he talks about top schools, Nebraska isn't really in there. But they keep visiting, they keep checking in. They're in consistent communication. They're going to get him back on campus this spring. They're back in the mix for Mark Matthews, Albert Simeon, 5-star interior lineman. That's one where Nebraska's again. He's closing in on the decision. He'd like to be done with this thing sooner rather than later. Nebraska's giving him a reason to reconsider that. Maybe get back to Lincoln at some point here in the spring to connect with Coach Wade and see this new coaching staff in action. Nebraska's on the short list there. There's like a 3 schools really battling there. But Nebraska's on the bottom end of that 3 right now, so they have to work up a little bit. And I think Coach Rule stopping by, Coach Williams stopping by, and just the effort, Coach Wade stopping by, like the effort of the coaching staff is giving Nebraska at least an opportunity to potentially prolong this recruitment.
Very nice. Let's come closer to home. 2027, you got Matt Erickson, Torrey Pittman already in the fold. Is there what else do things kind of look like here locally in 27 and 28 where you have a different staff? You've had some guys get out here locally coaching wise to make some visits. What do you kind of see happening here in state over the next couple cycles? Is Nebraska able to get backing to bringing in multiple guys a year in their recruiting classes
Yeah, potentially. I mean, here in 27, you've got multiple. Technically now,
already?
we
Yeah.
were obviously with Trey and like technically at multiple, but like new offer out to Barrett Cottrell. That's one. He's going to be back on camp. He's going to be on campus on Sunday. That's one that could move quick. I mean, he's a Nebraska guy. He knows his program really well. Pretty familiar with the history and all of that. I mean, that's if we're talking about who's likely to commit next, like, he's very up. He's very high up there. And in 28, I mean, I think it's again, things have opened up a little bit where I think they are a little more open to um evaluating some guys. There's 2 safeties. I was just talking about this with Abdul Muhammad. There's 2 safeties in Lincoln in 28 that I'm pretty intrigued by. 162, 163. One at Southeast, one at North. some
North Star,
not North Star. I need to
Northeast,
look. Northeast,
Northwest.
Northeast. Yeah, Northeast. But both those guys really intrigued. I think by what they could be. I think they'll have to camp, have to visit. But there's some stuff there. So I think there's more out there now, especially in the offensive line. I think they're going to be a little more willing. I also think part of this is you have to look and reflect. I mean, so much of this is reflecting on what you've done to this point and how you want to operate moving forward. I did think it stung a little bit seeing a Nebraska native on the Iowa line this year. Like I think it stings a little bit when they see guys from Nebraska go elsewhere and develop and become productive players. And at positions, Nebraska's kind of struggle, or not, like, kind of struggled to produce homegrown talent at, especially as of late. So I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on trying to find the talent in state and keep them in state. And, like, I mean, you saw with Cottrell. Cottrell visited in the fall. Maybe didn't fit the previous staff and probably could have earned an offer then, but Nebraska and the new staff was pretty quick to offer. They're at least trying. So I appreciate the effort. But again, at the end of the day, you have to win games, and you don't really like, you're in a program now where you can't really afford to take. You can only take so many developmental guys. You want to be a
Right.
developmental program, but you can only take so many each cycle. Like this 27 class, a lot of these guys are going to be guys they're banking on contributing pretty early on in their
Early.
career, or working on into that rotation pretty early on in their career.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good segue into kind of one of the last questions I have for you here. I mean, do you think you go back to how Nebraska was sitting going into this time period in 2026, and they had their junior day, and you mentioned Danny Odom, and they had a number of guys that they liked, Jordan Campbell, the linebacker that they flirted with endlessly, that I think ended up at Miami. Despite the fact he kept threatening to visit or whatever it was. Then there was some other guys too that were up for that junior day, but that whole spring, even when they had all these people coming in for visits, it never felt like they had momentum. That does feel different to me on the outside of this now here in 2027. Do you think Nebraska has positioned itself that much better just because of having Trey Taylor and Tay Ellis and some of these guys already for trying to land a few more recruits in April instead of having to get that big swing in June again?
Yeah, I think so. I also think the calendar helps out. I mean, they're gonna get all of March here to work through, when kids are on spring break too, or they'll be able to get in some of those
Mhm.
visits, and work through some of that. So yeah, I mean, at least my read on it is I think they're going to be much better. Like, we're going to be coming out of April where not necessarily having to put just the finishing touches, but they will be just about, I think, coming out of April, just like, okay, well, they have to address this position and this position, but they have this, like, I could see them coming out of April and having quarterback, running. I mean, quarterback's already secured, but quarterback for sure, running back, linebacker, and maybe waiting on one to two more DBs, but having a lot of your, like, the bread and butter of the class, like, really in there. I could very much see that coming out of April heading into. I also think part of this is guys want to be, like, guys want to be done with this process sooner. Like, you have guys lining up official visits and stuff, and that's still going to be, I think, where we see a lot of these dominoes really fall. But I mean, with all of these processes so accelerated, how many of these 27 targets have visited Nebraska 3, 4 times already? You know what I mean? Like, they're plenty familiar with campus, plenty familiar with the staff, and especially at positions where Nebraska's had some consistency, at the position coach. Like, I mean, DB's a little different, but, like, there's been multiple DBs that have already visited 3, 4 times since Addison Williams has been here. Like, they don't necessarily need an OV for Nebraska to land them. Those guys could just be done here in the next few weeks,
Mhm.
next few months, and just commit to Nebraska after spring practice.
We got the schedule on, what was it, Tuesday? Tuesday. We got the Big Ten schedule, Nebraska, 7 home games, only 2 later in the season after what? They host Maryland on October 3rd,
Mhm.
or Indiana. They host Indiana on
Yeah.
October 10th. And then they have Washington on the 31st and Ohio State in late November. What's going to be what is the Tim Verghese prediction for the big recruiting weekend for Nebraska in the 2026 schedule?
I kind of think that Washington date.
Yep, that's where I'm at too. It lines up with what the USC timeline was as well. I have a weird suspicion Nebraska will be campaigning hard to get a night game, so they
Mhm.
can play on Halloween night. They're going to have Frankenstein alternate jerseys or some random thing that Adidas cooks up, where they'll have pegs coming out of the ear holes of their helmet, whatever. It's something like that. And I I just think that Washington game is, and it's weird because you have Ohio State and Indiana conceivably are going to be top 10 teams when you bring them in, but they're going to have to make big use of all their visit weekends, and they do a really good job with that. That is one
Yeah,
thing that, for as hard as I am on this staff in some ways, their ability to get recruits to campus is the best by far that I have covered
yeah,
here at
and
Nebraska.
to take advantage of it. I mean, they've not necessarily to like Scott and even Riley before that, but like they haven't necessarily had like to deal with the as many blowouts, or as
Mhm.
many like really embarrassing losses. But I think this staff in particular does a really good job of win or lose, guys leave speaking positively about the program. I mean, you remember like when
Yeah.
like there were times when Scott was here where guys would leave the program. It's like, yeah, I'm not coming here. Like it's just not happening. Like and it was pretty blunt. It wasn't, it's like, well, do I even need to publish like a review from your weekend? Probably not, because you're not coming back. Like I just be like, hey, Nebraska, it's not happening. Um, but like you're at a point now where for the most part, I mean, most everybody you talk to is like, I mean, it's tough to see them lose, but this, but this, like there's always a positive for them to latch onto. And the staff does a good job of, despite the very busy schedules, despite everything that goes into a game day weekend, they find time to connect with a
Yeah.
lot of guys in town,
They
even like
prioritize it.
even
They
the
really do.
underclassmen. Yeah,
They really, really do. Tim, we appreciate you prioritizing Building Blocks Thursdays, making it a part of your routine. We appreciate everybody prioritizing it, joining us here on another great Thursday. Thank you to those watching here live on YouTube. Thank you to those that are watch later or will listen on your podcasts, wherever you get those. Please hit like and subscribe. Check out the Patreon at the I-80 Club. Get to be part of that conversation there. And I'll bid adieu to Tim here and to all of you. We'll be back Friday. Jack Mitchell joins, of course. It'll be a feedback Friday. So get your questions in. I'll flash the banner up here if you haven't seen the email or you don't know it. Unemployed I80@gmail.com. Would love to have your questions. We're going to get more into the schedule. We're going to get into basketball. We're going to get into the minutia that is covering Nebraska athletics on Feedback Friday. And of course, we'll get into your feedback and your questions and everything else. Have a good one. We'll see you at noon on Friday.